Hey everybody. So today I want to do part 2 of my section on modern philosophy in my historical analysis of my ontological thesis. So my ontological thesis here is God and Modality and Excursus on the Ontological Proof. And let's just open it up here and see what page modern philosophy starts on. So modern philosophy starts on page 50. And the second section is Leibniz, and Leibniz starts on page 57. And just a bit of creative insight here as I was looking at the name Leibniz. I always have trouble spelling Leibniz's name because I always want Leibniz's name to start with a lie, L-I-E. So that's a bit of creative juice that I had there. But that wasn't the original creative thought that I was thinking, that I was just going to say. I had a second creative thought, so I said that first. My first creative thought was going to be I before E except after C, while Leibniz is spelled L-E-I-B-N-I-Z. So it's I before E except after C, but also there's L, and that's probably because I believe Leibniz is a German philosopher, so there might be a little bit of his translation of his name, or his name in English may not be following the rules of English grammar. Okay, so page 57, and we'll get right into it. As you can probably hear, there are people doing work outside, so I will try to talk where you can hear me, and I don't think that will be a problem. So 57. All right. And as I was looking, I skimmed through this just briefly before I, came here on camera, and I realized that there were two maybe sections of longer formal proofs. And as you've seen, if you've watched the part 2 of the Anselm video, it took me, I think a little bit over 30 minutes to do that proof of Hartshorne. So, and it was only 10 premises. These are a little bit longer. So I want to avoid unnecessarily taking time. So what I think I'm going to do is either read the proofs or skip over the proofs and maybe not write them on the board. And that way, so that way what we can do is kind of get through this stuff more succinctly. But then I probably will come back around and do each of the proofs just for comprehension purposes. So enough introduction. I think we are ready to start. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. So he is from, his lifespan was from 1646 to 1716 CE, so Common Era. All right. Let's get into it. Influenced by the pantheism of the Spinozan tradition, Leibniz embraced the core tenets of rationalist dogma. At the top of the list, under his rather radical theory of relations, is his connection of contingency to the stream of scholarship on the ontological argument. Following in the tradition of Descartes and Spinoza, Leibniz saw the advantages of Anselmian reasoning. However, unlike most rationalist philosophers, Leibniz also saw the flaws in this progression. In his mind, the way to patch up the ontological proof was to demonstrate the possibility of God's existence. Up until this point, the only person who had seriously considered the idea was Duns Scotus. Leibniz, however, took it upon himself to create an entire framework dedicated to the analysis of possibility. With such work, he paved the way for later thinkers such as Robert Maitel and later progressions such as the conceptualist argument for God's existence. Well, the conceptualist argument for God's existence. But I didn't put the for God's existence here. I added that parenthetically. So, there are two roadblocks that arise when trying to construct a proof for the possibility of God. First, there are those who consider this feat impossible because they believe it's an assumption that relies upon intuition and not proof. Second, there are those who would posit that theism and the concept of God are incoherent by nature. This is to say, they think that there are contradictions in the nature of God. And then I put footnotes 98 and 99 here. So, these contradictions mainly arise with the attributes of God. For example, in regards to omnipotence, one might raise the paradox of the stone. This is essentially to ask if God can create a rock too heavy for him to lift. In regards to omniscience, one might ask if there is a greatest set of all sets for God to know. If God's supposed to know all everything, and there's not a set of everything, how could you know it, right? That's sort of some commentary on the side. And then that was footnote 98. Now footnote 99. There are some theists, such as Cornelius Van Til, who would maintain that any such contradictions are not contradictions but paradoxes. A paradox is something that seems contradictory at first, but is in reality true. Another way to stage this reasoning is that there is a difference between a contradiction and a mystery, and this is another way that Van Til, I would say, kind of draws this out. So mysteries, and I believe also Michael Butler talks about this a little bit. Let's see, so, mysteries are possibly true, whereas contradictions are flatly false. A contradiction may have the form A is equal to not A, whereas a mystery might take the form, as the positive ions entered the atmosphere, my mood became negative, right? It's like, well, that's sort of a play on words. It's kind of mysterious why that shouldn't, right? That shouldn't happen, right? So that was just an example I came up with. All right. So therefore, the Van Tilian argument is an argument from analogy. Mysteries are not contradictions, and contradictions are not mysteries. Okay. So, contra both of these concepts, Leibniz makes the argument that there is positive proof that establishes the possibility of God's existence. In his heavily contentious work, Monadology, he presents his proof as follows, quote, "Thus only God, in parentheses the necessary being, has this privilege, if he is possible, then he must exist." Now, something that has no limits involves no negation. Every truth about it is positive. So it involves no contradiction, because all contradictions boil down to something of the form P and not P, which contains a negation. So God must be possible, from which it follows that God exists, giving us an a priori proof of his existence. And then footnote 100, I just say Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz and Herbert Wilden Carr, I guess, or I'm not sure if Carr is another author, because I looks like I have a period there. That's not important though. Anyways, it's the Monadology, and this is through London, Favell Press, 1930. Okay. Okay. So, end of quote. Since its humble beginnings in the Leibnizian closet, this argument has been remodeled and redone to fit the fashion of Robert Madel's designer wardrobe of logic. Before delving in, and I'm using, that was kind of a metaphor there, I guess. Before delving into the depths of his reasoning, it is important to get some basic definitions under the belt. Definition 1. A perfection is simply a positive quality that expresses what it expresses without limits. Definition 2. Maximally great being is a being, all of whose essential properties are perfections, and all of whose essential properties entail perfections. So, Madel's summary of the Leibnizian argument is as follows. L1, end quote. L1. All perfections are compatible. L2. Every essential property of a supremely perfect being, in parentheses God, is a perfection. L3. If something's essential properties are perfections, and all perfections are compatible, then its essential properties are compatible. L4. If the essential properties of something are compatible, then it is possible that it exists. Therefore, D3. It is possible that a supremely perfect being, in parentheses, God, exists. And then footnote 101, this is Robert Madel, the ontological argument, and Craig was the editor, but this is the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, and 2009. Okay, so for some reason I have the Blackwell Companion to Craig / the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, and then I say the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology a second time. So I don't know why there is that repetition there in the citation. That may have been from a citation generation machine that did something like that. But yeah, there should just be one, the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology. Anyways, it's Robert Madel's argument, the ontological argument, in the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology in 2009. Okay. So that was the end of that quote. Okay, so the only flaw in this line of progression is that L1 seems to be left without any backing. As such, an auxiliary argument is given in favor of L1. Quote, S1, if any two perfections are compatible, then all perfections are compatible. If any two perfections are incompatible, then they are necessarily incompatible. That was, by the way, that was S1, well, okay, I forgot to say S2, so S1, if any two perfections are compatible, then all perfections are compatible. S2, if any two perfections are incompatible, then they are necessarily incompatible. S3, if any two perfections are necessarily incompatible, then it is either self-evident that they are incompatible, or it can be demonstrated that they are incompatible. And then in parentheses for S3, we say that because necessary truths or a priori and a priori truths are either self-evident or demonstrable. And end of parentheses. Okay, S4. It is not self-evident that any two perfections are incompatible. Okay, S5. If it can be demonstrated that any two perfections are incompatible, then either one is the negation of the other, or some part of the one is incompatible with the other. S6. If one perfection is the negation of the other, then one of them is not positive. Perfections are simple positive S7, perfections are simple positive qualities. S8, if some part of a perfection is incompatible with another, then one of them is not simple. And then that was S8, so therefore L1, all perfections are compatible. And then footnote 102 for this quote is the same thing, Ibid. All right, stepping back from contemporary advancements, the talented polymath also created a system under which to analyze the notion of possibility. Since its inception, much ink has been spilled as to the validity of the framework of so-called possible worlds. The very idea of what it is to be a possible world is indeed a bombshell in contemporary philosophy of logic. There are also a wide variety of differing accounts as to how possible worlds should be construed and interface with one another. And then footnote 103, I say a beautiful summary of this framework is explicated in the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, and I say Proust, Leibnizian Cosmological Argument, and Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, pages 24 through 34. The actual article, now that I'm thinking about, maybe a little bit longer than that, but maybe that was just the part that spelled out this system of possibility. All right. So, going forward, these accounts will be explored in more detail, but for now, only simplistic details will be used. Leibniz talked about possible worlds as if they were possible states of affairs. In this way, he most closely models the hand of Wittgenstein. However, Leibniz used his possible worlds framework to say something much more radical than would be expected from a trained logician. Leibniz maintained that out of all the different possible worlds that there could be, there is one possible world that is the best. Moreover, because of the absolute benevolence of God, the current world is the best possible world. Aside from the flippant mockery of Voltaire, Leibniz's radical notions sparked a plenum of serious conversation in the modern and contemporary eras. At first, the idea seems incredibly counterintuitive. For example, the gratuitous evil that abounds in the actual world could surely have been blotted out by the Creator. This goes against the idea that God created the best possible world. More fundamentally, there seems to be a growing trend in analytic philosophy to reject the idea of a best possible world, or the idea of a best world. Instead, one might posit a range of worlds between capital W sub 1 and capital W sub limniscape or sub infinity, which is the sideways 8. So in this range, there is no best world, because for every world W sub n, capital W sub n, there's always a greater world, capital W sub n plus 1. Off the basis of these two simplistic objections, a fury of contemporary outrage has arisen to Leibniz's argument. Most notably, Bill Rao's argument for improvability has been thought to have shaken the foundations of Leibnizian thought. Michael Almeida, in his book The Metaphysics of Perfect Beings, gives a formalized version of this proof. Before we analyze the formal proof, we must understand, quote, the variables x and y have as a domain the set of possible worlds in the infinite sequence of worlds. The variable O has a domain, and then in parentheses I say the possibly empty set of omniscient and omnipotent beings. The quasi-formal language includes box and diamond, representing respectively broad logical necessity and possibility, and a predicate for actualization, capital A. The proposition God, capital A, Y, and O, capital A, Y, are the quasi-formal counterparts of the English propositions God actualizes Y and an omniscient and omnipotent being actualizes Y. And then I put in footnote 104, and I say, Michael J. Almeida, The Metaphysics of Perfect Beings, New York, Routledge, 2008, and probably page 15 was where that was found. Okay, so now we have the basic symbols underway. Now that we have the basic symbols underway, the formal proof may follow. And then this is 17 premises, and it's quite a proof. So I probably will go through this in another video, but I don't think it would be helpful right now to go through this, simply because I think it would just make this video a lot longer than it already is, and we'd rather just kind of get to the meat. So let me just see how long I've been talking for, actually. Yeah, so I think I've been talking for about 15 minutes, 15:48, so close to 16. All right, so yeah, let's skip the formal proof and let's keep reading, and I think that'll be good. So this should be good for what I'm about to say should be good for anybody listening along. So to reduce this proof down to the level of the non-academic philosopher, there are two basic principles that found the progression. The first idea is principle B, which states that a maximally excellent being would have to actualize the best possible world because of his absolute benevolence in every situation. The second principle was weakly explicated above and can be labeled the no best worlds principle. It basically states that there is no best possible world. The problem that bluntly arises is that if a maximally excellent being must actualize the best possible world, and there is no best possible world, the maximally excellent being is incoherent by nature. While this seems troubling at best, the critical responses of William Hasker and Alvin Plantinga have helped formulate a response to this reasoning. First, Hasker notes that, quote, First, Hasker notes that the, quote, moral standard expressed in principle B is too high, and then in footnote 106, I just say Ibid, and it's page 21 of the same book. Oh, and also the formal proof that I talked about is footnote 105, and the source is Ibid, the Metaphysics of Perfect Beings. You can find this proof in Appendix A of Mike Valmiera's book. So, yes, that's good. All right, so by this, we can summarize Hasker's reasoning as follows, and then I give this pretty much basically Hasker's formal argument here, and it's really nice, and it is also formal proof. This is 18 premises, so I'm not going to be reading through all of it here, and it would, again, I don't want to take too much time, so for many of the same reasons, I'm going to skip this, and I'm just going to say footnote 107. This is that same book, Metaphysics of Perfect Beings. This is Appendix A. So yeah, that should be fun. Now, here's what I say. This should be it. So again, if simplicity is more effective in argumentation, meaning I'm going to try to simplify this down so you don't have to understand this in order to keep reading on. All right, so again, if simplicity is more effective in argumentation, it might be noted that moral obligations must be possible to fulfill. For example, we should not condemn the owner of a small town restaurant in New Zealand for the deaths of a tsunami in Taiwan. First up, the restaurant owner could not have stopped the storm because he was not in Taiwan. But secondly, even if he was in Taiwan, he would not have had the ability to stop the storm. Likewise, because the obligation to actualize a best possible world cannot be fulfilled, considering there is no best possible world, we cannot hold it over the head of a maximally excellent being for not choosing the best. An interesting connection at this point might be to try to insert Alvin Plantinga's ideas about theodicy and see where it goes. This is interesting because Leibniz used the best of all possible worlds to cure the problem of evil, and now Plantinga, who hates the idea, is also dissolving the problem of evil with possible worlds. Plantinga's attempt at theodicy basically states that because God is absolutely good, when he wants to actualize one possible world out of all the possible worlds he could actualize, he wants to actualize the world with the most good. In order for the world to be good, it must contain great-making properties. Let's just do a thought experiment. Let's say that the incarnation and the atonement are great-making properties. And by the way, this is kind of Plantinga's defense. I'm trying to remember the paper in which he brought this up, something about the atonement being a theodicy. But this is based on Plantinga's reasoning. So I'm kind of surprised I didn't cite it as like a paraphrase, but yeah. All right. Anyways, but let's just read through it and give me back then the benefit of the doubt. I don't know. Let's just keep going. Let's just do a thought experiment. Let's say that I may not have been able to find the exact phrase, because I remember trying to look at this in God, Freedom, and Worlds, and I was also looking at one of the articles that Flanagan wrote, and I think I heard this reasoning sort of in a video that he'd done. Of course, I didn't think at the time to cite the video, but what I did think was, I was like, I need to find an academic source. I can't be sort of citing a video in this thesis. But so that may be why I'm not doing it. But I can say, and the context of this probably is going to give him credit. It kind of has to. But anyways, just wanted to make that painstakingly clear. All right, so let's just do a thought experiment. Let's say that the incarnation and the atonement are great-making properties. Now let's say that these great-making properties are so great that no matter how much good there is in a world, it could not equal the amount of good that could be gained from incarnation and atonement. Also, no matter how much bad there could be, or how much bad there could be in a possible world, it could not equal the amount of bad that would occur without incarnation and atonement. The logical conclusion to draw from the above information is that God, being good, would create a world that has in it incarnation and atonement at some point in time. But to have incarnation and atonement, there must be sin, and for there to be sin, there must be evil. So yeah, I may have modified that a bit from the way Flanagan presented it in, I think, a video from Closer to Truth or something along those lines, but probably not much. So yeah, I don't know why I didn't at least put a citation in there at the very end. The only thing that I can think, though, is that I was literally talking about Flanagan right before I said it. So I think I might have just gotten carried away, and might have just thought, yeah, this is doing what Flanagan is. Anyways, so that is section 2. That is Leibniz and the contribution that I thought that, or the nuggets that I thought were good to talk about with Leibniz. So I talked about some of his ideas, but I also talked about more of what modern philosophers have said using his ideas, because that will play a stronger role when we get into the thesis proof itself, because that is one of the ideas, is that, you know, one of these first premises that you so often hear. I think it's Bill Craig who's formalized Alvin Flanagan's proof in sort of a simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fashion. And the first premise is it's possible for God to exist. So basically the idea is that if it's possible for God to exist, then God exists. And that is straight from Leibniz. So that's kind of why I did the Leibniz quotes. That's kind of why I did some of the discussion and what the academics think about and have thought about, and kind of said, yeah, this is formally valid, and it's at least possible that a being like God exists. So yeah, thanks everybody, and have a great day. Bye.